Hi, and welcome. We're excited to be part of the second edition of an Ekphrastic Series, a recurring series that invites writers and artists in Singapore to take viewers through a personal tour of an exhibition found in the National Gallery, Singapore. I'm Adan.
And I'm Felicia.
And together we're AJ Low, the writers of the Sherlock Sam series of children's books. These are mystery books that are based off Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's Sherlock Holmes character. Our Sherlock is a 10-year-old chubby boy detective who, along with his robot partner Watson and his friends in the supper club, solve mysteries around Singapore and the rest of the world.
Like most of you, we've been kind of going stir crazy at home. And we've also been watching a lot of online programs and talks and webinars, and that has helped make us feel a lot more connected with the rest of you.
It helps that we also have a lot of video games to play.
In fact, it was video games that helped us connect to the exhibition titled Between Declarations and Dreams, Art of Southeast Asia Since the 19th Century. And we know it sounds a little strange, but we'll explain.
When we were first asked to do this, we were worried that we wouldn't really relate to the artwork in any way. Other than our books being set in and around Southeast Asia, it didn't seem like we had much in common with the artwork. But as we looked through the various pieces of art, Felicia suddenly said, "Hey, doesn't that one look like Resident Evil?" And then suddenly it all clicked in place for us.
Sort of how Sherlock Sam puts together clues in all his books.
And playing video games helps us as writers because it reminds us that we need to interact with our readers' five senses.
And if you think about it, when you walk into a gallery, you are the video game player. You survey the scene, you interact with the set in a way that the artist has no control over. So join us as we discuss the art in Between Declarations and Dreams and video games. There are four general parts to a video game: story, aesthetics, mechanics, and technology. Story in video games can be told in different ways, including dialogue, environment, text, cutscenes, and mechanics. The aesthetics of a video game primarily means how it looks, from cutting-edge graphics to 8-bit style of nearly 40 years ago, and everything in between.
Mechanics are where video games truly differ from other art. Very few art forms allow a reader to interact with it, and in video games, mechanics are how players interact with the game. Can they jump? Can they fly? Or buy and sell items? We will discuss three of these video game parts in more detail, in tandem with various works in the collection.
Some of the first pieces that caught our eye were the landscapes, quite possibly because we couldn't go out to do research for our books like we usually do. We were stuck at home and forced to use Google Maps satellite view to explore a world that we no longer had access to. We were drawn to Wakidi's Unggarai Sianok, which features a wide open vista that immediately reminded us of open world games that we play. I was reminded of Legend of Zelda, Breath of the Wild, when Link, the main character, emerges from the cave and kickstarts the game. Both images feature large, imposing natural features slightly off-center and immediately draws our eyes. The reddish large cliff in Unggarai Sianok and Mount Doon in Breath of the Wild. As players or as people looking at the painting, we are immediately compelled to explore further.
Space isn't the purview of just one game, of course. Most open-world games feature beautiful vistas that draw our eyes to the world's natural landscape, just as Wakidi does. But this space isn't simply something pretty to look at. It conveys a sense of possibility. Something can happen here. In fact, something will happen here. A space this large and open is teeming with possibility, and possibility is where story happens.
It is important to us to have access to physical locations like in video games and in this painting, because a space represents possibilities, a new case, a clue, a red herring, an adventure. We miss being able to explore open space. On the other end of the spectrum, we have an entirely different kind of landscape. Pratuang Mjoran's Red Morning Glory and Rotten Gun is a surrealistic expression of a terrible tragedy in Thai history. The 1976 student massacre precipitated by right-wing agitators and carried out with the help of the Thai police and military. The images in the painting are strange, unnerving, and downright horrific, even without any background knowledge. It made us wonder if we should set a story in a claustrophobic setting, a locked room mystery maybe, inspired by 3+ months in a very small HDB flat.
Surrealism is often used in video games to convey similar feelings of dread, especially in games that are not outright horror. Bioshock takes place in Rapture, an Art Deco-inspired underwater city. It is full of crazed objectivists, driven mad and deformed by overconsumption of a genetic material known as Adam. Rapture makes architectural sense, but as the player walks through its halls, they notice everything is slightly askew. Figuratively speaking. Everything is dark and foreboding, and there is something terrible around every corner.
Similarly, Little Nightmares follows 6, a raincoat-clad girl attempting to escape a cruise ship. But this is no ordinary cruise ship. While the general shapes and contours of the world are recognizable, they are presented in exaggerated and disturbing ways. The janitor character is a perfect example of the imagery of this game. He is quite clearly a person, but his overlong arms and the folds of skin covering his eyes make him a horrifying one. The player's attempts at escape become more frantic the more they see the janitor.
Space, regardless of whether it is open and inviting or desolate and claustrophobic, always suggests a narrative. The aesthetics of the space presented often decide the kind of narrative that we will experience.
Ismail Zain's From There to Now is a symmetrical triptych. It features Malay motifs like morning glory flowers and lace doilies, and suggests patterns in sarung kebayas and architectural features in traditional homes. This was a reaction to the National Cultural Congress's stipulation that art and culture should foster strong national identity and social unity, through the focus on indigenous Malay and Islamic cultural ideas and practices.
But when we first saw this, we thought about doors. Doors are a big part of video games, and literature in general. They often lead somewhere new. They separate two spaces and make each one distinct. They can even form a barrier between two spaces. And of course, doors could be something other than doors.
One of my favorite games with a strong narrative is What Remains of Edith Finch. It is a story of a young woman going back home, a home she hasn't been to for a long time. The house is full of locked doors. The entrances to her family members' rooms barred from her. Edith can only look through the peephole at her extended family's rooms at the beginning, and must explore to discover alternate routes and alternate doors to gain entry. Any good mystery writer knows doors, open or close, real or symbolic, add suspense to a story. The moment we came across Rama, Sita, and Laksamana in the forest by Anak Agun Gedek Merengek, we knew we were looking at a narrative. There was a story with a beginning, a middle, and an end in the painting. When we read the notes, we learned it was a depiction of a scene from the Hindu epic, the Ramayana. The painting could be segmented into 3 parts, each representing a different part of a level in a game.
Level design in a video game requires 3 things: a starting point, an ending condition, and at least one obstruction between them, though usually many, many more. Completing a level, getting through all the obstructions between the starting point and the ending condition, can mean either 1. Physically moving through a space from point A to point B, 2. Manipulating items, people, and or events in the space provided for a desired outcome, or 3. A combination of the 2.
At the bottom of Rama, Sita, and Laksamana in the forest, we see ordinary people, possibly tired or defeated. Is this the beginning of the level? Were these obstacles Princess Sita and her group had to overcome? We also see a river hinting at travel, as well as a deer. Is the deer a creature to battle, or is it a friendly creature in need of help? In the top left, we see Princess Sita again, this time with a spinning wheel. She's in a magical circle, apart from the ordinary cares of the world. She has perhaps arrived where she's meant to be at the end of the level, having travelled from the starting point and overcoming every obstacle on her way. Our writing is often inspired by places we visit, things we read or watch, and video games we play. We'll take locations, visuals, and ideas and remake them in a way that's original and specific to the stories we want to tell. We love history and culture, and are always looking for interesting tales to reinterpret for a younger audience, making it relevant to them. This might be why we were drawn to Jim Supankat's Ken Dedes, the combination of old and new.
Kendedis is a sculpture made up of two distinct sections. The upper portion is a recreation of a renowned Singhasari-era Javanese statue, while the rest of the piece features a hand-drawn female figure, her jeans unzipped. The piece is named after the legendary figure of Kendedis. By naming the piece Kendedis, Supanga ties together several famed mythical and historical female figures, perhaps with deliberate ambiguity, almost asking the viewer to decide which figure he was attempting to recreate in his reinterpretation. By also including the comic art portion, he was perhaps attempting to make the piece more relevant to a modern audience. Taking something old and making something new out of it is something video game developers have learned to do as well. Resident Evil 2 is a good example. The original was released in 1998 for the original PlayStation. Last year's remake looks a lot better, changes the gameplay to cater to more modern sensibilities, and has some new and remixed puzzles. The narrative, however, remains relatively unchanged.
We said recreation of existing works is a new idea in video games, but recreating yourself isn't. As video game technology improved, so did character customization technology. I'm currently addicted to a game called Animal Crossing New Horizon. And it's partly because I get to customize the way I look, the color of my skin, my hair, the shape of my eyes. I look at my character and I feel a connection, which is surprising because she doesn't really have any story except for the story that I make up for her. Jim Supangkat recreated at least one legendary woman in Kendedis, as well as recreating an existing sculpture. But he added his own twist, just like a player recreating themselves in a game, or a game developer remaking a game from the past.
And now it's time for a creative exercise. We've been talking about the artwork in the Between Declarations and Dreams exhibit and video games this whole time, and how one reminded us of the other. Now we'd like you to do something similar. We would like you to look at either Damrong Wang Uparaj's 3 movements or Ithapal Tangchalok's Nocturnal Landscape No. 2, and use them as a springboard to create a video game. When you look at the paintings, what do you feel? Relaxed? Discomforted? What do the colors mean to you? Both paintings seem segmented into parts. What do you think that means?
Convert those thoughts and feelings into mechanics, aesthetics, and a story for your video game. How would a character or characters in your video game explore those thoughts and feelings? How would they interact in a space? Why are they doing this in the first place? You can compare and contrast with existing art. For example, my video game has a surrealistic art style like Dali's, or my characters move across the screen like a wayang kulit puppet, or my video game has a grand sci-fi story like Liu Cixin's 3 Body Problem series. Or you can explain it in minute detail. If you are more conversant in video games, you might even want to compare it to existing video games and build on it. But you should definitely try to have fun and try and create something that really speaks to you.
Hello, my name is Emily and I'll be responding to Wang Oparaj's 3 movements. To me, the soft edges and symbolic swaths of blue and white contrasted with the collage paper and bold grey gives a sense of freshness and tranquility amidst what seems to be chaotic. Almost like one is caught in between conflict, yet a sense of calmness is implied. I also drew inspiration from the artist's background as well as the time period that his artwork was done in. So in my video game, the protagonist is a mechanic in the Royal Thai Air Force contingent, forming part of the effort to aid the US in the Vietnam War. Through subtle interactions in the game, an expressive story is painted, and it reveals his role in the war not just of the dominant narrative of a soldier, but also as a brother, a scapegoat, and so on. Scenes are constantly repainted as the protagonist navigates his environment, creating a dreamlike landscape that might seem blurry from afar, but reveals its details in intricate brushstrokes, reflecting the repercussions and heartfelt experiences of the war.
Hi, my name is Shirley and I'm responding to 3 movements by Damrong Wang Uparaj. That's because it reminded me of my identity crisis fits where I dyed my hair blue, so yeah, I felt inspired to include that into my game. My game starts off in a school setting around graduation season, and Gray, our main character, he doesn't really know what he wants to do yet. He can't help but compare himself to his friends who have vibrant and colorful hair. Each of their colors represents their aspirations, and yeah, so For example, for Josh, he could have blue hair and he aspires to be a dancer. For Gray, he has grey hair, but we follow along this journey to find his identity in this game. At the end of the game, his hair color will be unveiled based on the different paths he takes.
Hi, my name is Ivan, and the video game that I would like to create would probably be based on Ithipol Thanchalok's work. I was thinking of a game that plays with the horror genre, maybe with an element of mystery, so like a barnyard murder inspired by the Slender Man. So what struck me about the painting was that suspension of the traditional landscape in the horizon. And instead he uses this dark red-brown color to paint it. That suspension and, I suppose, inversion of normalcy in a landscape made me think of a game that used that idea as a premise. The reeds and grass in the foreground make me think perhaps that the setting in my video game can be much more rural, and that playing off the red in the background creates that kind of tense, nervous atmosphere that would be perfect for a game in the genre. With generally darker color values in the work, our eyes are pretty much drawn to the only light that we can find, and he creates this with the patch of green grass and reeds. And to me, that illustrates that fraught atmosphere and adrenaline-filled tunnel vision that one might experience under fight or flight. So I create something definitely disturbing and tense, something that sets your teeth on edge. Yeah.
Thank you for watching the second edition of an Ekphrastic series and listening to us talk about art and video games.
Remember to post your creative writing responses using the hashtag #GalleryAnywhere. I'm Adan.
And I'm Felicia.
And together we're AJ Low. Thank you for watching. Take care.
Stay safe. Bye.